Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 50 of Dollar Dialogue. Today's episode is about Made in Mexico, the peso, the youth, and the policy shifts with Mariangela. And today, our podcast is from the outside about Mexican economy. Even though it's doing pretty well, the peso is strong, inflation has cooled compared to last year, and the international investors are excited about nearshoring and supply chains about south of the U.S. border. But as we both know, growth on paper doesn't always mean progress on the ground. So today for our guest speaker, we have Mariangela, who won the Wharton Best Delivered presentation. She's one of the smartest person that I've come across, and today we are very honored to have her here shed some light on the issue. So before we start, Mariangela, is there anything that you would like to add to the introduction?
Hi, hello everyone. Thank you so much, Arib, for that introduction. You summed it up perfectly, actually, Mexico's current situation. And I'm really excited to talk with you guys about our financial system.
Thank you so much, Mariangela, for the introduction. So, as part of that disconnect from what we have seen, seems to be where you're growing up. For example, Mexico is in fact like economically doing very well. It is one of the largest economies in the world. However, there are some deep underlying issues that needs to be addressed. So, macroeconomically speaking, Mexico is the 15th largest economy in the world with a modest growth of around 2%, inflation around 4%, but it has very low unemployment rate. And on the surface, things look stable. The peso's nearly strong. There's like nearshoring and coordinated policy under President Claudia Sheinbaum's expansionist plan Mexico, which aims to draw $300 billion in investment and create 1.5 million jobs annually. But dig deeper, and you'll find an economy still fragmented, especially from a youth perspective. Over half the workforce remains informal, 55 to 59%, and a sector that sustains families but offers little in terms of wage, benefits, or job security. And for young people, this often translates into juggling multiple side gigs like landscaping, delivering goods, or even participating in tandas, which are like rotating credit circles just to make ends meet. And the story splits further in Mexico's two economies. In cities like Mexico City, Monterrey, or Guadalajara, youth can access universities, startups, or tech corridors, and there's internet, co-working spaces, and modern trappings of the global economy. But head south into states like Oaxaca, Chiapas, or Guerrero, or into rural enclaves, the picture shifts dramatically. There, schools lack resources, roads are unpaved, and power cuts are common, and public services are often missing. So, state by state poverty mirrors the divide. The southernmost states often rank highest in poverty, while income gaps across Mexican states are among the widest in the OECD. And Mariangela, since you're coming from the Santa Monica, which is up north in Mexico, is there any personal anecdotes that you would like to share in detail about your experiences living there,
Yes,
perhaps?
yeah, definitely. So, like you just mentioned, I think you summed it up pretty clearly. The key word here is fragmented. And from my perspective as youth in Mexico, I can definitely testify in favor of this definition because, as I have noticed growing up in my country, the general wealth of the country is very, very polarized. So, like you just mentioned, there are some specific areas in which there is possibility for lots and lots of growth, economic growth, both financially, like personally, and also generally as a growth state-wise. But there are other areas in which lack to access to education transcribes into general poverty and lack of access to basic needs because of lacking financial literacy. So, from my perspective, I think the most important thing to mention that not many people know of is that Mexico, at least for me, is a very precise example of how access to education can literally change an entire family's or an entire state's access to wealth. So, like I had actually talked to Arib before, there is a very important university. It's actually the best university in all of Latin America. It's called Tec de Monterrey. And it was actually founded in my hometown, which is Monterrey, which is where I live and which is where I study. This university was actually modeled after MIT. So it's very progressive and it's very business centered. So having access to this specific high profile university has actually led our city to becoming one of the biggest financial strong points in the entire country. So during, for example, I wasn't born yet, so it's not exactly an anecdote, but during the 80s and the 90s, there was a huge boom in the economy, specifically coming from our town, our city, because of this entrepreneurship chip that everyone seems to have, which is given by the financial education that this university provides. And in contrast, in other areas, for example, in other states, we don't see this. It's not common to have this entrepreneurial spirit, and also it is not common to have the tools needed for success in entrepreneurship. So we really do see this disparity. And I think generally, at least for me, there is a strong sense of community that also drives everyone to want to become better. And there is also lots of, I think I would describe it as patriotism, where we want our country to become stronger, because we see, as thanks to the statistics that you have just mentioned, our country has grown a lot in the past recent years. And effects like the recent nearshoring has actually sparked a lot of expectancy and excitement so that our country can become stronger financially. So areas with higher education levels, financial wise, like Monterrey itself, are actually striving to educate the rest of the country so that we can all become financially literate and we can all help grow our country.
I had a question for you. What do you think Mexico can do to fix their wealth disparity issues? And also, I had a second question. I'll ask it together. Do you think the recent actions that Claudia Sheinbaum's been taking on education and improving the access to education, do you think that's working or at least going in the right direction, or do you think it needs to be reformed?
Yes. So there is a very, thank you for the question. It's really interesting. There is a very specific area that is actually driving education for the better. So to answer your second question first, yes, I certainly think that financial education is improving in the country as a whole. And I think that's mainly given by humanism. So during the 70s, the wealthiest families in northern Mexico, they started a lot of companies. But the difference between these companies and other, for example, international companies or companies that started in different areas of the country was that they were a people first company. So they were proactive in the sense of their workers' rights, and they displayed a lot of morality and a lot of character in the areas of humanism. So the leadership that was displayed by these companies influenced the rest of the country to improve in the areas of workers' rights and other humanism, like such as, for example, to give like a very specific sample, there are companies in Monterrey that founded schools, that promoted sports in the vulnerable areas, that promoted culture and the arts. And I think this aspect of finance and business is often overlooked because, I mean, business is business, right? We don't often think about improving our community through humanism. And I think this very specific I don't know how to call it, this very specific characteristic of northern Mexico's entrepreneurship has driven the country for the better.
Yeah, thank you for such an insightful reply.
Yes, of course.
Yes, thank you so much for such insightful responses, Miss Golazzi. And this, I honestly couldn't agree more. And I also think that this is the perfect moment to talk about something that really ties into everything we've been saying. And this is the youth of Mexico. Because we always hear that youth are the future, but in Mexico, youth are actually the present. Nearly half of the population is under 30. And that's not just a fun fact, it's a massive force of energy, ideas, and potential that's already driving innovation, creating jobs, and reshaping entire industries. We're also seeing young people in Mexico everywhere stepping up. They're launching startups, freelancing online, learning tech skills, opening small businesses, and even building global careers. But there's also another side to this, and we have to talk about it. Because for all the opportunity and potential, Mexico's youth are also facing serious challenges. And one is opportunity. But before opportunity comes, you need education. And access to quality education is still deeply unequal, especially between rural and urban areas. And even when young people do get educated, they often don't find jobs that match their skills. That mismatch is frustrating and it limits economic growth. Then there's also youth unemployment and underemployment. Many are working in informal sectors without contracts, benefits, or long term stability. Others are forced to migrate, not because they want to leave, but because they don't see opportunity at home. And yet, despite all of this, what's amazing is how determined this generation is. And they're starting to adapt, self teach, launching side hustles, getting involved in activism, and even participating more in politics and community leadership. So, a few questions. One question wanted to ask you is: do
Yes.
you have any ideas or like any opinions on what specific policies we could implement in order to invest more in inclusive education, accessible internet, and affordable pathways to entrepreneurship?
Yes, definitely. You mentioned something that is very important in Mexico right now. There is actually, to make the issue a little bit broader and go into a little bit more detail, we have a very big problem that is labeled fuga de cerebros, which is where the most educated youth from our country ultimately ends up leaving the country. And so all of this investment in their education just is not reflected into our economy. So to fix this, there are some initiatives that are already in place, but other ones that I think would be really, really helpful for our youth is, well, first off, I should clarify a very important thing about us Mexicans is that where if we go somewhere and we don't find an opportunity, we create one. That is very much part of our personality. So I think something that is really important is that the people who have had historically more access to education have a compromise to spread this education further into people who have not. So myself, for example, I had the opportunity to attend along with Arib the Wharton Global Youth Program. And from this opportunity that I was lucky enough to receive, I am going, for example, to make the most of it. And I have founded a group that is dedicated entirely to promoting financial literacy in the vulnerable communities of Santa Catarina. So this compromise that we have with our peers and with our fellow youths, I think is what is most important and what is going to drive our financial literacy rates higher up. So to say it simply, it would be that the people who have had access to more opportunities have a compromise to create more opportunities for the people who have not.
So I had a question which is sort of unrelated to the current conversation. So if you guys want to continue that, we can, or I can ask my question.
Yes, Rishan, please ask your question.
All right.
So before you ask the
Okay,
question,
sorry.
I
Yeah.
also loved how you connected it back to your own experience and what you're doing with your group. So thank you so much for this personal, like.
Yes, Rishan, please ask your question.
Okay, thank you. I had a question regarding some of the controversy that came up when Claudia Sheinbaum won her presidency. I
Yes.
mean, it's incredible, first woman and first person of Jewish origin to be president, right? Or is it
Yes.
prime minister?
Yes,
President.
that's correct. President. Yeah.
President of Mexico. But, I'm sure you know all the
Yes. I'm
controversy
aware.
with the cartels. I just wanted to hear your opinion on that, if you think it's credible, if you think it's completely false, and the importance of, or the influence that the cartel may have in the highest powers of Mexico.
Yes. So, from my insight, the controversy spurred mainly because historically there was a period of time that is called El Mandato del PRI. So, to kind of speed run a little bit of history right now, there was a period of time in Mexico where one single political party called El PRI controlled kind of dictatorship. It was an unofficial dictatorship because technically there were elections, but they were rigged. So we had the control of this party, and right now, from my insight, what I think spurred most of this controversy was the people's fear of this being repeated again. So once again, and honestly, Mexico does struggle a lot with insecurity and the cartel's influence. But I think that us as a country, if we focus on things like culture and the arts and sports, those things can drive our youth away from, how should I say this, uh, dangerous paths.
Okay, so you think the way to phase out the cartels is basically to provide an alternate path for the youth, right?
Yes, so narcos will always be a very bad thing for Mexico and in our country, and they are currently a very big concern. But from the point of view of our youth, yes.
But do you think, I mean, it is a bit unrealistic, but do you think it can ever be phased out? Because Mexico, I mean, its geographical position is so beneficial for drug smuggling that I feel like it's going to be really difficult to phase out a cartel or the cartel,
Yes.
because it's an easy path into the U.S. So do you think that's possible or realistic, or do you think it can just be improved, but you can't phase them out?
I think the situation can definitely improve,
Mhm.
but the insecurity situation in Mexico is very deeply intertwined with our history. So I think baby steps is the way to go.
Yeah.
We have to think mainly about improvements, and one step at a time, we can see what the future allows us to do.
So, sorry, I'm asking a lot on cartels, but
It's okay. It's okay.
uh, the recruitment for the cartels, does it happen mostly in like the big cities, or is it from rural areas?
Well, no.
Or-
It happens exclusively in the rural areas, and uh, the way it operates, it's a little bit tricky, let's say. So basically, it does not happen in my city, Monterrey. We don't really struggle with that, so I don't have any firsthand experience. But it happens in the entire country. In the rest of the country, it's very present, and that's why I think it's so important to have different options for our youth to be concerned with, so that they will not need to turn towards these paths.
Yeah, and also, it's probably also because of, like you mentioned, the, or maybe I'm understanding wrong, but from what I understood from what you said, Monterrey is probably on the wealthier side and more educated side of Mexico, right?
Yes.
So, yeah, so I guess that is the way to get rid of the cartel.
Yes, which is why my main discourse was actually centered around how education, how like my testimony is that education can clearly improve an entire city's quality of life, not just wealth wise. Now that you
Yeah,
mentioned also the cartel situation, that is also another area in which education and religion can help improve the quality of life of its citizens.
yeah, and I also think like even like broader, just education in general
Yeah,
just helps.
yes,
Um,
definitely.
it just helps improve the country's everything. Like it helps in every sector, and
Definitely,
it
yes.
is a very beneficial thing for a country to invest in.
Yes, definitely. It is one of the biggest investments. So investment wise, we're all looking for returns, right? The higher the
Yeah,
returns, the better. And I think even though this may not seem like a monetary return, the returning quality of life is huge. So it's definitely one of the best investments the country can make. And ultimately, even though one may not notice, it does translate into monetary return because a happier youth will eventually lead to better work conditions and therefore a better increase in our industry and the economy as a whole.
yeah. All right, you got something to say?
Thank you, everyone, for the discussions. I thoroughly agree with all the stated facts, Mr. Rishan Ali, Mr. Supreeth, Nagella, and Mariangela. So, moving on to the next segment, which is about looking specifically into one city of Mexico. So, today we'll focus into Monterrey, which is the city that Mariangela proudly calls home, and what many call La Capital Economía de Mexico, which is the Mexico's economic capital. But this isn't just about wealth, it's about why Monterey works. And the answer again and again is, as through thorough research that we conducted before, is education. So let's start with the numbers. Monterey metro area produces over $190 billion in GDP, with purchasing power parity. That's more than entire countries like Ecuador, even Slovakia. And its GDP per capita is around $37,000, which is nearly double Mexico's national average. The economic strength isn't just symbolic, it reflects real productivity, real opportunity, and the real regional leadership. And the state of Nueve Leon, where Monterrey is located, it represents about 8% of Mexico's national GDP, despite only having 4% of the population. So this must clearly show that something is working over there. Unemployment is low, just over 3%, while inequality remains, the richest earn up to 13 times more than the poorest. And the poverty and joblessness are still lower than in most other states. And its foundation is mostly industrial. Big players like Cemex, FEMSA, Banorte, and Coca-Cola have their headquarters here. But the real story is now a shift of knowledge economy, which is something that economists are using more and more nowadays. Think biotech, mechatronics, or even aerospace. This is driven by hubs like the PIIT, which is the Parque de Investigación y Innovación Tecnología, which is a science and tech park turning ideas into businesses. And at the heart of this transformation is the Tecnológico de Monterrey, which Mariangela was talking about before. It has over 91,000 students and around 10,000 faculty. And it's not just one of Latin America's best universities, it's an economic engine. It was the first school in Mexico to connect to the internet and today leads the country in patents. More than 41% of the graduates there have started at least one business. That's twice the national average. And in total, the alumni founded businesses have generated over $260 billion in annual revenue and over 220,000 companies and supported around 4 million jobs worldwide. So it's clearly not just a university, it's a developmental engine of Mexico. But that's even more powerful. What we're talking about here is yet the 48 incubators, the 16 accelerators, and 15 tech parks. But youth in Monterrey aren't just taught to analyze problems, they're encouraged to build solution. And this shows up in how they respond to challenges like inflation, which is very important. Because yes, prices are rising, the gases, rent, everything. But in Monterrey, the response from youth is often, let's create an app that makes delivery more affordable, or let's launch a fintech to help low income families budget matter. And this shows resilience, but it also shows a culture which is developed specifically in this city, which is somewhat not prevalent in other parts of Mexico. So, with that being said, my question to Mariangela is, since you're from Monterrey, and Monterrey is clearly economically better than majority of the other Mexican places. So, what do you think personally living there makes Monterrey so successful economically, and how do you think the youth sort of affects that role?
Yes, thank you, Arib, for once again summarizing everything so clearly and so well. Personally, I think our differentiating factor goes way beyond finance or business or economics. Yes, we're all very interested in business and entrepreneurship, but I think what makes us different is our humanitarian point of view, or Monterey's in general point of view. People from my city, we do things not because, of course, earning money is something everyone wants to do, but we do things to make our community better. We do things to make ourselves better. And if, for example, one is running a startup or something, we take decisions because it's better for the company, it's better for us. We strive for progress, and we strive for the progress of our city as a whole. So we have this very global point of view where we want to take into account everything and everyone. And I think this mentality of doing things well because you have a responsibility towards yourself and towards your community, of doing those things well, that's what ultimately makes things work. And that's why we have such high success rates for startups and for businesses and for generally for personal finance. Also, Monterrey is a deeply religious city, and that also guides the moral decisions of our people. And we're all very interested in peace and in helping the people around us. And having that mindset as a base for all of your decisions instead of your own personal well-being or any other superficial goal, I think in the long run, that's what ensures the prosperity and the general well-being of any project, whether that is business or cultural or sports or arts, because Monterrey is very prominent in all of those areas. So I think the specific thing that makes us different from the rest of the country is just this base mentality of a very moral and a very strong character point of view.
So, do you think the base morality that you mentioned, do you think that that's missing from the rest of Mexico for a specific reason, or is it just because Monterrey is such a well-off city compared to the rest of Mexico, and is one of the most
That's a,
lucrative cities in Mexico? Is that part of the reason, like the education that is available there, or is it some other reason?
that's a very interesting question, actually. If I were to think about it, yes, I definitely think education is a very important factor, but also I think it has been an example. So Monterrey has been this way for some generations now. So the original founders of the really big companies like Cemex, like FEMSA, they set the example. They were the ones who, once they became big, they offered opportunities for their employees completely for free. And I think all the generations that grew up under their leadership were instilled by a sense of responsibility. So because they received this very special benefit, we all have now that we all grew up under their leadership, we all have that sense that we also have to give back to our community like we received the opportunity.
So, how do you think Mexico should go about bringing that mentality to the rest of Mexico, or what can be done in order to help improve the quality of life through the regard of the morality of the people. What do you think can what do you think can be done, and how long do you think realistically it would take? Because changing the mentality of people, especially as many people as Mexico has, probably would take a very long time.
Yes. Yeah, so the issue before the one of the main reasons why this growth was localized is because of like Mexico's geology. We have very varied geology up north. We have deserts down south. We have jungles and beaches. And in between the cities, there isn't much. It's just nature. So it's either a huge desolated desert or a huge desolated jungle. And it was difficult for this exchange of ideas to happen. But obviously, right now we have social media, and I think it's a wonderful tool if used correctly. I think there's definitely something that can be done using social media. Social media doesn't have to be something that we need to be scared of, or that, like it has been used in the past, has to be something bad or detrimental. I think we can definitely use this very powerful tool and the connectivity that it offers. We can definitely use it to spread our ideas and our points of views and discuss, like, just allow this exchange of ideas between regions that has never been possible before. And I think just like other areas of the country can learn from us, we can learn from them. So thanks to social media, I think I'm actually very excited for this exchange of ideas that can happen in Mexico right now, and will lead us to new places and set new goals for growth.
So you mentioned learning from other nations. It's sort of putting you on the spot here, but could you think of any model nation that you would want Mexico to be following in the footsteps of, or is it
Nations
too
or,
much to ask?
regions?
Nations, regions, countries, whatever you want.
Oh, okay. So, off the top of my head, one of the very, very important things about Mexico is how varied our indigenous cultures are. We have hundreds of different indigenous peoples, and they are spread out all over the country. So, myself personally, I'm very interested in the cultures of the South, and something that has always seemed very interesting to me was how all of the natural resources that the country has, like, for example, the petroleum or natural, like the mines, they're all found in other areas, regions of the country that are not the north, and also specifically the south. So it's very interesting how the south, having access to all of these natural resources, has not become an economic focus point. And so I'm very interested of learning about what their ideas are and what is working and what is clearly also not working, so that we can all model sort of each other's societies and grow as a country.
I also wanted to talk a little bit about poverty in Mexico because I feel like it's very complicated. Because take Monterrey, for example, it's a city known for skyscrapers, industry, and wealth. But just beyond these business districts, there's so many communities where poverty is generational. And in these areas, although they do lack money, they also lack in the skills and systems that help people escape poverty in the first place. And that's also where initiatives like Moneymakers Academy comes in. It was actually started by our fellow Arib Malik, who is also a Duke of Edinburgh Award recipient, and he started his foundation to teach young people how to build real financial knowledge. And you also shared how you started a foundation to teach the younger generation about financial literacy. But my question to you is teaching financial literacy enough to solve poverty? Because how would financial literacy really help when there's barely any money to start with and when jobs are so scarce in places like Monterey?
Yeah, so first off, congratulations for your initiative. Yes, so education is also generational. You mentioned generational poverty. I think education is also generational. Knowledge can be passed down through generations, and that's definitely something that is needed. Basic education in finance, economics, and business as a whole is really lacking. And I definitely think that even just basic education can definitely make the difference between making a correct personal finance decision and an incorrect one, because the simple act of deciding to spend or not spend $1, $2, $3, that can make a difference in the family that is living in poverty. So yes, I do think that even basic education can definitely make a difference in the vulnerable areas. Of course, there is need for support from the government to make a true change. But one of the things that I love about my country is that the people themselves are committed to helping others. So there are tons of initiatives like mine that are also dedicated, especially in Monterrey, that are also dedicated to education in all areas, not just finance. So I think these initiatives really do make a difference and can really make a difference in the long run for the personal finance of a family. Yes, also,
That's yeah, for sure, for sure. Continue.
sorry. Also, something that I think is really important is that in Monterrey, we employ people from other states. So going beyond just Nuevo León, it's not just because I forgot you had also mentioned employment. In Monterrey, we offer employment because it's an industrial city. Obviously, we offer employment from to people from other poorer states. So lots of people from around the country relocate to Monterrey or to Nuevo León for work. And actually, I think about 70% of the workforce are from these poor states or poor cities. So, I mean, definitely, I'm proud of where I come from because Monterrey and Nuevo León are definitely a focus point that is driving the economy of the country for the better.
Thank you so much for such a beautiful explanation. And
Thank
I also wanted to ask if factors like family expectations or social pressure affect whether young people can apply this financial knowledge that you teach.
Well, in my specific area, a lot, and this can be something positive or not. In my specific area, it is definitely it's something positive because, like I said, everyone in our society has this chip of entrepreneurship is good, which is not something common in other states and also in other countries that I know of. Entrepreneurship is perceived as something very risky, something few people undertake. But specifically me, I have this very like specific anecdote of one day in school. A teacher asked us, he went around the room asking everyone what they wanted to be when we grew up. And 95% of the country said, I want to start of the country, I'm sorry, of the classroom. 95% of us said, I want to start my own company. I want to be my own boss, like entrepreneurship. It's a common slogan, as you know. So we are very influenced by our society, but in my case it is for the better. We have glass, steel, beer, paper, textiles, bread. So there are lots of areas a person can grow in, and lots of industries we can grow in as well. We also export a lot, obviously, especially to the US, but we are main exporters. So there are lots of areas that a person can specialize in. So there is not a specific pressure in which, oh, you specifically have to focus in this area. The positive pressure is general, and we have the freedom to choose what exactly we want to focus on.
Thank you, everyone, for the insightful responses. I completely agree that the culture is really what differentiates Monterey. So, moving on to the next segment, which is about the politics, power, and the past of Mexico. I would like to talk about not just the headlines, but into a deeper dynamics into how young Mexicans experience power and global politics today. So, as mentioned before, in 2024, Claudia Sheinbaum became Mexico's first female president, winning over 40% of the national vote. And she was a former climate scientist and protege of President Lopez Obrador. And she represents continuity, carrying forward the Morena Party's populist mandate. But the country she now leads is at crossroads. Scheinbaum inherits a nation where military has never had more power in civilian life. And under AMLO, we saw the armed forces take control of infrastructure, airports, even customs and railways. And the National Guard, which was originally pitched as a civilian security force, now falls under full military command. And Scheinbaum hasn't reversed any of it. So this trend echoes deeper parts of the Mexican history. In developing countries like Bangladesh, which was previously part of Pakistan, the military was heavily involved, and we often had military dictatorships under power. The similar can be said in Mexico in the old days, since the days of Porfirio Diaz, who was a general who ruled with an iron fist over 3 decades. And the relationship between military and the civilian rule has since been very complex. After the Mexican Revolution, of course, the country worked hard to establish a civilian-led democracy, especially during the PRI era, even if it was a one-party system. But we also saw moments like 1968 when the military forces massacred student protesters in Tetlaloco. And more recently, Ayotzinapa in 2014, the disappearance of 43 students allegedly involving collusion between the state and the cartels has left a deep scar on the young people, in specifically their trust in governmental institutions and military. So today, when young Mexicans see generals running infrastructure or soldiers on the streets, it's not just about safety. It's about a memory. It's about the fear that Mexico might be sort of shifting back into the model where accountability disappears and power becomes sort of centralized. This time under the guise of development, and that's then the global stage with tensions rising over the fentanyl trafficking, tariff threats from the US, and concerns about foreign policy interdependence. Mexico is being pulled in many directions. And Scheinbaum has said that, if I'm not mistaken, that she won't allow US troops to enter into the country. But she's also signaling a willingness to tighten cooperation under a new security pact. Under this, at the same time, she's also pursuing closer trade partnerships with Canada, possibly to hedge against US pressure. So, my question to Mariangela would be, based on these facts, how do young people feel about the new administration, or how do they feel about the military expanding their role in everyday life? Do you feel safe, or or does it like sort of raise red flags for the younger generation?
Well, honestly, I'm going to go on the personal level here. I myself, I'm still trying to understand these new politics. I am still trying to digest them because they're brand new. I was born in complete freedom. I had never had to think about the military before. I barely even knew what it was growing up. I never thought about it. And now it's constantly headlining the news. It's something that we as a society are constantly thinking about. And these new changes in politics are honestly quite concerning. Like, I also have this memory myself in school. We were taught the entire military system and the entire judicial system, and from one day to another, none of that information was useful anymore because it was all reformed, and it was quite concerning that an entire textbook worth of information could be changed so drastically and so differently. Um, in a matter of a couple of days. It's definitely something that is very new, and we are all still grappling with. We're all concerned, but honestly, studying is our defense. And like I said before, our education is our greatest shield right now. I think even though things are changing really rapidly, being educated not just on the current affairs, but also what could happen in the future is our greatest protection right now. And myself, I'm still trying to understand what is going on.
Thank you, Mariangela. Yes, politics can be a very controversial role. But would you say historically, when Mexico was under the dictatorship of Porfirio Diaz, under those 3 decades, would you say Mexico experienced any development, or during the PRI's rule? What do you think was the best time period where Mexico really saw its development?
Well, interestingly, the era of Porfirio Diaz is often referred to as the golden age of Mexico because there was huge growth. He brought the railroad system into the country. Obviously, that didn't exist before. And from 1968 to 2010, uh, wait, I think I got my dates a little bit mixed up,
Oh no,
but
it's fine. It's fine.
yes. So during the age of Porfirio Diaz, there were huge developments happening. The railroad system, there were huge. There were huge foreign investments, especially done by the French as well. The French influence was also very present, and that sort of European influence also helped in the culturalization of the country. Also, developments in architecture, infrastructure, um, um, how I'm not oh services, that's how they're called, services for the general society, not just the wealthy, also mailing and posting services. Everything was just generally improved under an iron fist, obviously. But oh, also the Tratado de Libre Comercio, it was also done during that time. It allowed for international trading between the countries, and that actually led to the opening of the frontiers in around 1980 with US and Canada, which are also obviously currently key players in our economy. So that period of time allowed for the internalization and globalization that we have right now with the other American countries.
That's very interesting, Mariangela. And like, I didn't really think about it that way. And also, like, I was thinking, like, like, mucha gente dice que Seinbaum is AMLO con falda. And this is something that I was reading, like, in the New York Times. And would you say that's fair, or do you think those are just false information that, like, on the news?
Más o menos, más o menos. Gracias por recordarme el chiste.
Oh, okay. And yeah, and just on that, I was also wondering, since Scheinbaum's presidency, is Mexico economically headed in a more positive direction, or would you say it's still facing its challenges?
I mean, right now we are pretty stable, but I think the challenges that my country has to face go beyond Scheinbaum's presidency. I think right now they're very influenced by external factors and the US as well as relationships with Canada. So personally, I wouldn't know exactly how these things, I don't think anyone in the world knows exactly how things are going to turn out with US politics. So honestly, I think our biggest issue is corruption right now. So growth wise, I think we are still very dependent on foreign policies, especially Canada and the US, and we don't have much control over that. But corruption, I think, is our biggest, like internal corruption, obviously, is our biggest issue.
So, this corruption that you're talking about, what sort of demographic does it come from? Because I would imagine, obviously, the cartel is a very big influence, not as much as it was before, but it is still very present in Mexico.
Yes.
Or is the corruption coming from there, or more like
Well,
our side of the world where it's businessmen who
yes.
play
So
with
no,
politics?
Yes, thank you for the question. Not exactly businessmen. Corruption in Mexico comes from politicians. So it is not common knowledge, but a slang term in some sorts that we talk about, that politicians aren't really politicians. They do no politics whatsoever. All they do is embezzle money and allow for the growth of cartels and greater corruption of the forces of that run our country. So the main issue regarding corruption comes directly from politicians themselves, and labor unions, unfortunately, are also immensely corrupt. So labor unions, they work together with politicians, but it's not super related to businessmen or the business world, and
Yeah.
it's hard to make business, but it's not impossible. So
All right. So, I know this is a. Oh, sorry about that. I know this is a very uh, difficult question, difficult to find a solution for. People have been trying to find a solution for a long time, but how do you think Mexico could possibly go about dealing with this corruption issue? Because, I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of it is just personal issues and normalization of corruption, I
yes,
think. So, what do you think can be done to move forward in improving the political scene and trying to get rid of the corruption best
yes.
as you can?
So definitely a hard problem to solve.
Yeah.
But uh, personally, my opinion is that the true meaning of politics has been lost over time. Right now in Mexico, politics is just what people do so they can get rich quickly. No politician actually has a passion for legislation or jurisdiction or all the things that politics used to stand for, debating the greater good or looking out for civilians. None of that is currently present in politics. So I think just going back to the roots of all of of what politics truly meant. Once again, Monterrey is one of the less corrupt areas in all of the country. So I have to say it definitely has to tie back to education and religion and values and family and all of those things that make us who we are, because the levels of corruption present in my city are significantly lower than those in other areas of the country. So I think it's rooted back to our personal identity and traditions. And other than that, personally, I think is just people have lost the interest in what politics really means and what politics really used to be. So, yeah.
I also had a question on more.
Thank you everyone for the insightful discussion. I wholeheartedly agree with all the facts that were mentioned, and thank you for the personal anecdotes as well. So for the final segment of our podcast, I would like to talk about something that we asked the viewers before on a poll, and this is something that we have also seen recurring in many of our previous episodes as well. And this is regarding brain drain, or stay or leave, or Kedarse or Ise. So we have talked about inflation, regional inequality, and national politics. But if you like zoom in something that is deeply personal for a lot of young people out there, and that's the choice between Kedarse or Ise, to stay in Mexico or to leave. And we know that over 12 million Mexicans live in the US, and migration isn't just about escaping poverty anymore. It's about like chasing opportunity, safety, and even dignity. But this is where the story gets very complex. While some youth are working to create change from within, building startups, or even organizing protests, becoming the change makers, others are sort of disillusioned. They feel stuck in a system that doesn't reward talent unless you're from the right place with the and or even with the right last name. And we have also seen the recurring theme of corruption as well, which makes sense why people want to leave. And this is the term brain drain, which is many economists use. So in specifically in Monterrey or even in Mexico City, the tension is very visible. You have elite schools, you have international schools, you have foreign investment firms, world class hospitals. But even there, like there's like young people asking, like, is this country really going to give me what I need to thrive? Or even in other states like Chiapas or Veracruz or even in Guerrero, the calculus is even harder. So this is a this is a question to Mariangela or even Rishan or Supreeth. You can also chime in. Brain drain is a issue that is occurring in in like developing countries, and how do you think we can potentially mitigate that, specifically from a youth perspective?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. Definitely, definitely a very important subject. Me personally, I come from a city where people don't really leave for the U.S. except for the holidays or short study, and nobody really permanently leaves. But it is definitely a very big issue in other areas of the country and in other cities. So, us personally, we have a lot of job opportunities and just general better quality of life that involves less corruption and less poverty, etc., etc. And I think if those are the things that are available in my city, and there's a low rate, really low rate of immigration coming from my city, then that is definitely a model that could be reproduced in other cities that could help. But it's definitely a really big issue, and it's multidimensional. Like the reasons why people leave the country are very, very varied. You cannot tackle just one issue and solve the entire problem. It's very deeply rooted. Mostly it's jobs, obviously. But if we solve the job, well, if we were to solve the job issue by potentially creating, not creating, but how do you say? I forgot the word in English. Um, let's say creating or improving our job opportunities, that would definitely, I think, help. But immigration is a multidimensional issue that cannot be solved simply or quickly. What do you
If I, oh, sorry, what'd you say?
Oh, I was just asking what you guys thought.
Oh, okay. I think if I understood what you said correctly, Monterey is not struggling with a brain drain, which is likely due to a lot of the points you brought up today about the mentality, like the community, the strong community, and the education and job opportunities for people from the rest of Mexico in Monterey. And I think that's ultimately the solution to a brain drain. And I mean, it's easier said than done, but improving education and creating jobs, employment is the basic framework that you need. But
Because obviously it's very there's Mexico is a young country, so the public education system is slightly saturated, but it's surprisingly good. There was a recent headline I read recently about how a team of Mexicans actually participated in the International Mathematics and Physics Olympiad from a public institution, and they won first place over the teams coming from Harvard and coming from Stanford and MIT. So there is definitely a strong public education system. If I were to add some of my insight, in my personal experience, what I've noticed that helps with this drainage is just employment. I'm going to be a little bit more specific. In other cities that are not the one where I live, rich people use other people to make money. And what I have noticed in Monterrey is that rich people make money along with the employees. And so, this kind of, I'm going to call it fairness for lack of a more technical term, this sort of fairness is what incites people to stay and to want to grow inside our own city without having to leave. Instead, in other areas, if the employees feel used by the rich to make become even more rich, then obviously that is not a good quality of life. That is not a situation you want to be in, and that is why you want to leave. I don't know if that was well explained.
Oh no, it makes sense. Like I understand the gist of it, and obviously it's something that it's something that is very divisive. And as youth, we can only like shed light on it. But coming up with real tangible solution is ultimately up to the policymakers, and eventually we want to inspire policymakers. But making the final decision is ultimately up to them. And so to basically wrap up the podcast for today, we'd like to we basically talked about Mexico's economy, about how it sort of became a robust sort of dominant powerhouse of Latin America. How we also looked at specifically how Monterrey was essentially the knowledge capital of Mexico and sort of the entrepreneurial hub where with very good universities over there, and like the Tecnológico de Monterrey. And we also looked on education and military and election in Mexico, how it impacted the youth. And finally, we also shed light on Mexico's past, where it is headed, and ultimately the brain drain issue. So it was very, in my opinion, very dynamic podcast today. We shed light on very important issues, and it was very fun to hear personal anecdotes coming from Mariangela, who is obviously very smart and very talented, specifically when it comes to Mexico. So Mariangela, before we depart for today, is there like any final words that you would like to say to the Dollar Dialogue podcast, or just anything in general before we conclude?
I mean, mainly starting off by thanking you all and reminding also your audience that change can come from us as well. If we all do our little grain of sand, like we're all trying to do back here in Mexico, we can drive change. And if we stay close to our moral beliefs and our values, we can all make our community better. And Mexico is great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mariangela, so much for being on a podcast today. And viewers, this is all for today, episode 50, which was about the Made in Mexico, the Peso, the youth and policy shifts with Mariangela. So this is the end of our podcast. Stay tuned for episode 51, which is regarding the economy of FIFA. So thank you all for today. See you next time with another very interesting topic, with another very interesting guest speaker.